Okay, that's working much smoother now. I'm quite happy with that. I can put in the arm here for the rangefinder. It's coupled to this plate which fixes to the inner helical. Yep, I can just see the screw hole at the top there. Put the screw in there. And the two tiny screws that hold this in place. Now, two of these screws were in quite good condition. Well, comparatively good condition. One of them is unmarked, the other one's only got minor marks on it. And the other two were pretty much destroyed. Right, that moves smoothly, and I can put a little spot of synthetic grease in the track here that stud rolls in. I'm just looking at the state of that. It certainly moves smoothly. Well, we'll call the focus assembly complete. I'll get this in. So what we got? We got the front section of our transfer shaft. Put a smear of synthetic grease in there. A smear on the outside. It runs through that bush, couples to the shaft, and I'm just checking to make sure it's coupling to the shaft. A little chrome piece that holds it all together, and I'm looking, there are 4 chrome screws because I've got 2 cameras worth. One of them here is quite good. One of them is not too bad, and so the one that's good goes at the top where it'll be seen. The next best one goes here where it won't be seen. So that all opens and shuts nicely. And I think I'll just about start on the film advance next. Okay, so the first task is to get the spring on the release lever. Now, the design of this spring changed over time. It became more or less elaborate with the number of bends and twists it had in it. And that one will not provide enough tension in that shape. So, what about its mate? I think its mate was, yeah, a little bit ugly. I'm going to have to straighten that spring up. We'll start with this one. This was the one that was in the camera body as it came to me, partly assembled. And it was bent out of shape. In various imaginative ways. I'll get another pair of pliers. I don't like these ones. So with the spring in place, I've got to get this into the camera. I'm just looking at this. I don't like the lie of that spring. It doesn't really want to lie flat. I think that'll be okay once it's in position. Here's my spring, and here's the screw. Get that started. And the lock lever drops in here. And at the top it has a return spring. The return spring is not as powerful as the return spring on the release lever. So it's a thinner wire and there's fewer coils. I'm just trying to pick up this C clip here, and that's better. I'll hold this spring down with my thumb, get that C clip into place, or E clip. Use the tail of my tweezers to pop that in position, check that that moves up and down freely. It does. Good. Now, what should I do next? Oh, film advanced components, I think. Yeah, that's always exciting. Let's do that. With the film advanced shaft, I'm going to lubricate this with some graphite grease. And I like this grease for this particular job because it's nice and tacky, and once it's got itself spread on the surfaces, it doesn't want to leave, which means it stays lubricating inside this bush here quite well. And I'll rub some into the spring so that the coils of the spring move smoothly over each other as it's wound up. At least one of these two advanced shafts appeared to me to have been over tensioned at some stage. The coil spring here was quite distorted. Now, sometimes people will have a camera where the advanced lever is reluctant to return to the rest position. Often it's because of some fault, like things being clogged up with dried grease or something of that nature. But they foolishly believe that if they just increase the tension on the spring, things will move smoothly. And of course, often that's not the case. So if I pull my release lever and lock lever back out of the way, and this is not dropping into the film, the take-up spool there, it means that spring is not seated in its groove. Let's take that out and start again. The spring here has to seat in that collar here, and it was just pushing aside, so it doesn't want to drop into the bush on the base of that take-up spool. Get this to go. This is where you can be very careful with that spring. Yeah, that's not really wanting to go. That was it, just dropped into place. That's good. So the 3 screws that hold that in position, because that plate's now rotated so I can't see the holes. Oh, that's always great. The light here today is really bad. That's it. That's what I want. We get 3 of these screws down here. The screws unfortunately are uniformly ugly, but they should do the job. As long as I can get good engagement with the screwdriver, they'll do up tight, there won't be a problem. All 3 in position. That's good. Now while I'm here, I'll put the lock lever for the rewind button in place. In this one, typically I lubricate the tip of this with a bit of molybdenum paste, and because I've got this handy, I'll lubricate through the pivot hole too. That slides in under here. The right way up would be good. The return spring and the shoulder screw. Make sure that the shoulder screw's not trapping the lever or the spring, that everything's free to revolve, and it appears to be good. And then I've got to get the tail of that spring lifted back over the end of the lever. That's good. And I will loosely place in there the sprocket shaft just to keep things sitting there nicely. Now I need to assemble the clutch assembly and the guide bush for the top of the film advance. Now the clutch assembly I normally lubricate with graphite grease again, for the same reason, because it's nice and tacky, stays where it's put, and provides good lubrication on those surfaces. What we have here effectively is a clutch that allows for some slippage between the take-up spool and the film sprocket, so that as film builds up on the take-up spool, and so would otherwise pull more and more film through the camera faster than the sprocket, the slippage allows that to all happen neatly, and so things don't get broken. Just checking the feel of that. Feels a little bit tight to me. A bit too much friction. I'll just crush that spring slightly. See if that'll make the difference. What I'm doing there is effectively reducing its tension. So it won't, that's better. So it won't be so tight against the drum. That goes in there. The bush for the top of the film advance here. The gear on this I will lubricate with a bit of synthetic grease, and usually a wipe through the centre where it runs over the advance shaft. This drops in here, and if I roll the take up spool with my thumb, it'll work its way down and sit tidily. A little standoff goes there. The ratchet pull, the film advance goes here. The screw that runs through those goes here, and I'll put a touch of synthetic grease on that so that the pull will move smoothly. Get that screw started. Check that the pawl is free to move, that looks good. And on the other side we have this shoulder screw, which also acts to support the shutter cocking rack to stop it pushing away. It's not particularly good at its job, but it does work. We'll do those screws up tight for the moment. I can come back and adjust things if I need to. The return spring for that little pawl is here. I'll get that in position over that screw. Doesn't want to drop down in position. I'll slacken that screw off so I can make sure that pops down behind the back of that screw. That's better. That's good. This drive gear can go in. I'll rotate that clockwise. Make sure that's pointing fore and aft. Everything's sitting in the rest position at the bottom. That's all good. Got the spring here, and this piece and that drive dog and the washer and the gear from the top of the film advance. I've got to look closely at this. One of these looked uglier than the other one. This one looks pretty good. Any damage to those teeth, of course, would transfer immediately to becoming damaged on the cocking rack. That's all good. I think the sprocket shaft can go in now, and the rewind button stuff should be sitting here not far away. Well, I'd pop the sprocket shaft temporarily through the base there. But now I can open up the back of the camera, put this film sprocket in position, take my sprocket shaft, a little bit of synthetic grease to the shaft top and bottom where it's going to run through the body casting, and some on the gear for good measure. It should drop down there, pass through the take up, through the sprocket there, at the base of the camera. Got to line that up with the hole in the bottom of the casting. Yeah, I'm not sure why that's reluctant. That's better. Pull back the catch there and allow that to drop into position. Okay, so that gear's all sitting in there. And I've got to put the screw in at the top here that drives it on the shaft. Did that thing fall out of place again? It blooming did. That's better. And the screw in this case is the same as the hinge pin screws for the front door. Hopefully the screw will start without any arguments. Look at that. Straight in. At the base of the camera, the rewind button. I put some synthetic grease through the spring. Got my rewind button here. It's the prettier of the two, and neither of them are very pretty. That screws into the base of the sprocket shaft. I'm just checking that that presses in, and now I'll tighten that up.